Well, welcome, and as you know, the audience has the questions. The panel don't know them until they're asked, and the first one comes tonight from Poppy Smith, please.
Is David Cameron's abandonment of his pledge to hold a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty a climb down which will anger voters and the Eurosceptic wing of his party? Robert Kilroy-Silk.
Yes, it will, and it is a climb down. It's more than a climb down, actually, it's a deceit. Because he knew, as did William Hague, that before the election, the next general election, it was like the treaty was likely to be ratified. So when he said he was going to hold a referendum on the Treaty of Lisbon, he was hoping that in fact it would be ratified and it would let him off the hook. It was a way, the pledge, the promise, the cast iron guarantee was a way of keeping his party quiet and papering over the divisions. OK, it's now been ratified. He's quite right, there can't be a referendum on that treaty. But we're not talking about the words, the Treaty of Lisbon. We're talking about what it actually entails. And what the Treaty of Lisbon entails is the creation of a super state of Europe. A Europe with its own president, with its own anthem, with its own army, with its own foreign secretary, with its embassies, with its diplomacy. It's a legal entity, enabled to enter into treaties with other countries, to act as a big player on the world stage, to actually reenact laws itself without reference to Britain. So that's the question. The question is, not do we want the Treaty of Lisbon, do we want what the Treaty of Lisbon entails, which is for us to become part of a superstate. And we should have a referendum on that. And the referendum on that, yes, of course, I accept, would be, are we staying in or are we coming out? And why aren't we asked that question? Why aren't we allowed to ever ask that question? People are going around saying those under 55 have never been asked that question. I'm sorry, none of us have ever been asked that. I wasn't asked it. When I advised my then constituents in 1975 to vote against continuing membership, it wasn't about setting up a super state. It was about an economic union. It was about free trade, holidays, cheaper wine. That's what we were voting for. No one has ever had the opportunity to say whether we want to give this country away. We've never had that opportunity. Right. Now, why don't we have that opportunity? What are they scared of?
I think that's
because
enough for the moment, Robert.
They know we will say no. Right. They know that we want to be governed by our own people, in our own country, in our own parliament.
Thank you very much, Robert. Nick Herbert, just a reminder of what David Cameron said. Today I'll give a cast-iron guarantee if I become Prime Minister, a Conservative government will hold a referendum on any EU treaty that emerges. So, that pledge is gone. What's the effect going to be on voters?
Well, the problem is the treaty has gone, and that was what the pledge was about. Let's be clear, had we been in government, there would have been a referendum. We came, in a sense, desperately close to the ability to have that referendum. Had things been different and the situation lasted just a few more months until a general election, had we won that election, we might have been able to hold that referendum.
Might have been able.
We would have been able to hold that referendum had the Czechs held out, had the Irish held out.
But we started by saying the treaty had gone.
The treaty has gone, and now
I thought it had been accepted.
The treaty has gone, and now it has gone into European law, and that's the problem. And let's be clear about whose fault that is. There's been a double betrayal by this government. The first betrayal was to sign up to this European Constitution in the first place, to sign over powers that were not theirs to sign over, to create a European president, to hand over all of those vetoes. But the second betrayal was to promise a referendum, as the Labour Party did at the last election, as the Liberal Democrats did at the last election, and then to renege on that pledge.
But surely...
They were the government, and they reneged on that pledge.
Wait a moment, Nick.
We would not have done so.
Wait a moment, Nick. That Poppy Smith is saying exactly that. David Cameron's abandoned the pledge for a Lisbon Treaty referendum. That's exactly what the Tories are accused of. That's what this is about.
There is no Lisbon Treaty anymore. These institutions have been created. So what David Cameron has said is that we can never allow this to happen again. There are specific areas where we must take powers back, and we must also put a lock on, pass a law, so that Parliament declares that never again can there be a situation where powers are taken away from Britain without there being a referendum.
You wanted David Davis to be leader of the Tory party, not David Cameron. Had David Davis won, he would be saying, as he said in the newspapers yesterday, the referendum should be the first piece of legislation in the new Parliament and should be held within 3 months of the election. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with
David Davis got it wrong.
I do think that's wrong, because I don't know what you would have a referendum about. And that's the problem. These institutions have now been created. Having a referendum, I'm afraid, there would be nothing that we could do about that. They've been created for the rest of the EU.
Talking about
and it's the Labour government's fault that has happened. What we need to do now is to focus on where we can take powers back and where we can prevent this from happening again by changing the law so that no government can renege again. And let's be clear, it was this government that reneged.
The person there on the
Misleading people again.
Yes.
I'd just like to say that I think it's criminal that politicians can deny us a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty. I believe democracy, if we value it in this country at all, and something like which was originally set up to be an economic union can now become a superstate and actually make laws for us by a bunch of unelected bureaucrats in Brussels.
Okay. And you? Yes.
In truth, I don't really understand why UKIP and the Tories are really anti-Europe. I mean, we're in the middle of a recession at the moment. Being in Europe is going to mean that we have more trade, we get better access to jobs. Your policies, the Tories' policies and UKIP's policies are going to cost us jobs.
All right. And the woman at the back there, in the second row at the back. Yes. Yes, you.
Surely there's no point having a referendum, because what happened in Ireland was they had a referendum, they voted no, so they had another one until they voted yes.
And you, sir, in the middle there, yes. Yes, you, sir.
Question for Mr. Herbert. Do you think you've learnt nothing from your last period in government, that you're so complacent that you think you're going to be the next government, and that you're hopelessly split now between Eurosceptics and pro-Europe, that you actually can't even be considered for government?
I'll let him come back to that.